Hello and welcome to the New School HR podcast. This is episode 05, the first. In this episode, we'll be talking about the first few interactions you'll be having within your operation period. This will cover conference calls, HR meetings, senior meetings, shop floor meetings, disciplinaries, employee relations, and training workshops. So sit back and enjoy. So the reason I've chosen to do a topic around the first interactions is because I've had the pleasure, shall we say, of being in new teams or new areas or new roles quite frequently throughout my career. Within the first company I worked for, I think I held about eight different job titles within the 9 years I was there. And in the second one, 2 different job titles. However, I switched regions quite frequently. So I think it's quite important that we nail these first interactions and that we actually, as HR professionals, kind of along the similar themes I've been saying in the previous 2 episodes, don't sort of just use it as an opportunity to say how great we are and things like that. So I wanted to kind of hone in on a few of these different sort of first interactions we would have. I say few, it's actually 8 different subjects I've picked out somehow. So yeah, let's go through the first one. So the first one is the conference call, or as it probably now is, the conference video, the Zoom, the WebEx, the Skype, whatever facility you use, Teams. This is something that, obviously, given the current situation we're in, which I've tried to avoid the whole topic, so I'm not going to focus on the why and this and that, but obviously we do have those facilities that probably are more enhanced now because of the situations we find ourselves in. And actually I think it's probably worked out positively because we're all familiar now with using the video facilities. However, conference calls are still there. You know, if you're traveling in a car between locations, you're not necessarily going to be on a video camera. So we'll stick with it as conference calls, but we can pretend it's videos or whatever. So the first thing I would say that's quite important around conferences is make sure you're on time. I am probably the worst for this because I always dial in bang on a minute, if not a minute after. So bit of a hypocrite here. Be on time. And the second part, leaning on that, don't double book yourself, because most of these things usually are rolling on a fixed time every week or day. So don't be a prick and double book it, because usually the conference calls, there's always some fucking person that's waiting for your input or unable to survive without you saying something. So just make sure you're there. And if you're not going to be there, tell someone you're not going to be there. Make sure that they have whatever it is you wanted to cover and that they take notes for you. That's another key thing. We never seem to ask anyone to take notes for us. So, in terms of an introduction, so these are going to be different. Sometimes it's around the room, sometimes it's introduce yourself as you dial in. I would say let's try and be human about it. So, you know, you get the guys that come in and it's like, Tom, regional advisor. It's like, okay, sure, Tom. We know you're in the room. Let's make it pleasant. Let's make it not so people feel a bit uncomfortable about our presence. If it's on a video, I'm not the happy sort of yay person. You know, I'll chuck in a wave or a head nod, or for some reason I by default do a military sign. Not quite sure what that's all about, but yeah, I like to fist bump people in person, but can't actually do that. So sometimes I just point my fist towards the screens, which probably looks like I'm trying to punch someone in the face, but it takes all sorts to be in a team, right? The next thing I would say is I wouldn't give my title, so I wouldn't come on and be like, name, HR business partner. I'd just be like, name, HR. That's it, right? That's what you need. Whoever invited you will know who you are, what your title is, and why you're there. The next thing I would say is listen, which I think is probably quite hard. Some of these conference calls just seem to go on forever. A lot of them could have been a little email or even a post-it note on your screen at the best of times. But do listen. I find that I do get useful information, especially when you're involved with other regions or other areas of the business. I always find these things quite useful and I always take notes. Ask questions. I think for some reason on the old conferences or the videos or whatever, people kind of shy away from asking questions. There's absolutely no point. You just look like a fucking idiot if you don't ask any questions, and then as soon as it ends, you send that person an email saying, oh, by the way, I wanted to ask this. Oh, that's bullshit, man. You knew you had the question. Just ask the damn question. There's probably about 17 different people there thinking the same thing anyway, so don't worry about looking like a fool. I think it actually is better. I prefer to have questions, or I'll always ask a question. The next thing is answer the question. So there's this old thing, I don't know why, where we just don't answer. We just kind of sit there and wait for the little lamb to go out and get slaughtered and then slaughtered. Like, chill, man. Just answer the question if you know, innit? As long as you're not kind of going out there and, being a prick about it. Like, oh, yes, this is it. No one wants to hear that. Or the other thing that I see is like, someone will answer the question but be really punitive and like make the person feel stupid for asking it. I would just answer the question and say, look, this is what works for me, or this is what I've done. Or, if you want, I can spend some time after the call and go through it with you, obviously, if you've got the time to do it. The next thing I would say is be yourself. The people who know you, and, on every conference call, there's always going to be a percentage of people that actually know you as an individual. They're going to know whether you're being true to yourself or not. And if you're not, when you go back to your team, sometimes, you might have been on the conference call as you're on the drive to meet the team or something like that. When you get there, you're just going to look like a fool. I've seen it many times where there's people that I work with or whatever, and I've been on a conference call, it's like, why are you doing that, man? That's some shady shit, or you're just trying to boast or take credit for something you didn't do or whatever. Like, chill, man. It's just a conference call. It's the exact same thing as being in a meeting, just on a phone or a webcam. So, just relax. It's okay. Just chill. So that's kind of my few hints and tips around that. I didn't want to go into too much detail because I think we're all probably tired of conference calls and stuff right now. We probably live on them. Just a few tips. Trying to think if there's anything else, because it feels like this was quite short in terms of one individual unit. But hey, who knows? If I think of something, we'll just come back to it. So the next thing is us as HR professionals, the actual first HR meeting that you go to. Now, I don't know, HR people, I think you kind of got the vibe that, although I am one, so I included myself in being labelled as irritating and annoying and bitchy and stabbing, all the things that I think we are as a group of individuals. I'm not actually that, but I'm saying we are, so I don't appear to be distancing myself from you guys. But the reality is, as a bunch of HR professionals, we're probably, or what I observe is, everyone is always trying to stab someone. Like, this ain't TV or like Mission Impossible, where all 6 of us have to go on some secret mission and come back with the biggest war scars. But anyway, I find the HR meetings to be quite hostile, and that's everywhere I've been, apart from the very first role in HR where I was a trainer. That was a good vibe. That was a good crowd. We all used to bust a joke or two, used to be real about our shit, used to ask questions and stuff. But I found as I kind of went up the HR ladder, it's everyone trying to prove that they're the best, and I don't really resonate to that. So I kind of probably by default take a back seat. And I'll be honest, I'm one of those people that I don't need to say something if someone's already said it, or I'm not the kind of like, oh yes, I'm really busy and I've got all of this going on. People kind of know that, and we all have our own individual areas of expertise or support, whatever we're doing. So I always try to, when I am involved, I try to make my presence be one that adds value. So in terms of pointers, the first thing I'd say is prepare. And I think, are we all guilty of it, where we commit to an action in the previous one and don't do it, and then we have to review the notes like 2 days before or ask for the minutes and somehow get it done. And it's amazing, because you know what? I think to myself sometimes, the amount of things I've done in the 2 days leading up to a meeting, if I'd actually done it timely or thought about it, I'd probably knock out quite a few things. So that's what I started doing now. I actually review the minutes when I get them. And I put those actions into practice because, they vary. But anyway, always prepare. Make sure that you've read through the actions from the last meeting. And you know what? This is one thing I don't see, but I kind of do. I'd offer to report to someone just to sort of say, you know what, you got this, or have you got this finished? You need anything? Can I do something? Why not? But I think most HR professionals will wait to see it, not get completely like, oh no, Susan hasn't done it. That's fucked up. The next thing I'll say is the old agenda request. There's always someone that will send out, whether it's your line manager or, the fellow business partner that's been tasked with holding the meeting or whatever, who will ask for agenda points. Now, It sounds really bad. I'm not the agenda point giving person unless there's something I'm really passionate about. I find it's an opportunity for people to just kind of raise some topics that we all probably are aware of. So, I always look out for them and I always kind of prepare, because usually somebody will suggest an agenda point that they've done and probably think that you haven't done it or whatever. So that's the only reason I pay attention to it. The next thing I would say is when you're in the meeting, just observe. Actually observe your team, because, I think we go through a lot, and I don't think as a group of individuals we actually share that we're going through a lot. We prefer to keep it to ourselves, to have those war scars, so then we can later on break down and have a meltdown or a crying session with another fellow HR person, which is just totally irrelevant. But actually, I take the time to actually look at my peers and actually see or make an assessment of how I think they're actually doing in terms of their well-being and stuff. And it's a great opportunity, especially if you're regional like I was previously. When you're together, you might not be together for more than once a month. So take the opportunity to observe and see how they are. Sometimes you can see that your peers are run down, or you can see they're really passionate about something or having a really difficult time. Let's be team players. Let's support each other, not just push each other under the water and use us as a stepping stone in Mario. The next thing is take notes. I think we always rely on the note taker, but I always take my own notes because they don't necessarily capture the same things that I would. There might be stuff that I hear that is relevant for me in terms of my business area. And actually, when I'm taking notes, I'm not taking notes for myself, I'm taking notes for my stakeholders, so that if there's something I need to enforce or go back on, I have a clear set of notes that I can refer to, or I write it in a way that if I'm going to later on turn it into a presentation or something, I can then convert that quite easily. And I think, I'll be honest, I have an iPad now with one of those Apple Pencils, and that would have been amazing if I had that in a regional role. I'm actually thinking about purchasing one just for my job, because obviously this is for my personal use. But I'd imagine that if you had a tool like that where you don't have to worry about pages and slugging around notebooks, that'd be pretty cool. So my request has always been, can HR directors, if you're listening to us on this, can you get us some not laptops, sorry, you do get us that. Can you get us some iPads with some Apple Pencils? You don't even have to give me a keyboard, just a pencil. It'd be so cool. I get so much done. It'd be good in the investigations if I can just PDF stuff and just show them, like, bam, there's the evidence. Anyway, off topic. The next thing I would say is gain an understanding of projects that are going on. I think that quite a few of my HR managers or directors that I've seen in the past always draw reference to it's an opportunity to share what's actually going on. I don't really like that stance, if I'm honest. I think that kind of says that maybe you're suggesting somebody doesn't have a lot going on. I think we all deal with things differently. I think we all have a different pace or whatever. And actually, usually when you hire someone to a role for the business area that they're supporting, it's probably because of their approach. So sometimes you have to adapt, not just make them feel absolutely in isolation or something. But anyway, I always try to get an understanding of what the project is, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to steal this and do it. Or the other real curveball is maybe you've already done some work on it. I've had stuff that I've been working on and then I've seen it called out and I'm like, yeah, here's the stuff that I did last year. Because sometimes you have it targeted at your actual area. It's not that you're trying to hide anything. But when it comes up and you see somebody asking for it, just share it. Don't be a prick. The other thing I'll say with projects, because it's a real bugbear of mine, when your boss kind of, you do something and you start it and whatever, and then you happen to go on holiday and then somebody asks a question and then you come back and they've got your project, not that that's happened to me before. If you've taken someone's project, bruv, can you just don't be a prick. I've actually had one person take a project of mine, say they're going to lead it, and then had to get me to run the actual conference call that they were having with my team about their project, which they didn't even do anything. They literally just took what I did and presented the exact same thing. They didn't even change anything. It still had my name on it. Come on, man. That's just dumb. And the worst part was, for 6 months I had to watch the same presentation being presented back and hear about how an amazing job they did, even though they did nothing new. But anyway, so when you're doing that, when you're stealing someone's work, can you steal it properly and add value to it? I don't have a problem with someone taking my stuff, but at least add to it if you had 6 months. But anyway, if you're listening, yeah, that's what you should have done. Added to it, not ride the success wave. But anyway, the next thing I would say is contribute if you're asked to. So sometimes you do get highlighted, and that might be because of your approach or your particular stance. Like we all do HR differently. I know how my sort of difference is to the rest of business partners that I've worked with. So far to date, I haven't come across one that's like me, apart from one person when I was a trainer that we were very similar. Apart from he was more people friendly than me. Yes, I can be clean about that. But yeah, it's very rare. So offer your style and offer your insight and share your understanding of something as well. Sometimes, I think we have many opportunities where something is said and we take it one way and actually it's meant a totally different way, or we read it a different way. And sometimes it's whoever's presented it, whether it's your manager or another senior part of the HR team, try to always get different viewpoints of what you're hearing, because it doesn't always necessarily mean your first reaction or your first understanding is the right one. The next thing I would say is don't refer to what you did before, or if you do, don't refer to it as this is what we did at this company, this is what we did in that company. If you've got something in the toolkit, just say, you know what, there's something that I worked on previously. If you want, we can share it. I can bring it up, and just leave it at that, man. That's it. And there's no need for any further explanations or anything. No one cares, right? Because it's a different company. So if you're going to put it somewhere else, it's about how they react to it, where you're putting it. So just be mindful of that. So the next part is the first senior meeting. So when I say senior meeting, I'm not going to put a table. I'm going to put a label on who that is. So it's up to you what you decide as senior, but it's usually going to be the person you partner with and their immediate reports or their peers. So the first thing I would say in preparation for a senior meeting is ask for the full agenda. Yeah, because their PA might not give it to you, or if they're doing it themselves, they might not have a full agenda and they might need support in terms of putting one together. So if you've seen something somewhere else or whatever, or even if you come like transferred across different regions or something, you might know something that worked. So it's about offering that support or getting that clear steer on what it is that you need to provide for that same meeting. Obtain the previous meeting notes. Just because it's a business area, and maybe if it's the first one, doesn't mean that you have to just sit there and enjoy the free sandwiches and the free Coca-Cola. Sometimes it is about actually having an understanding of what the actions were, because if things are being spoken about, then perhaps there's some insight that you have, and actually you might be able to add to it. And if you have a bit of an understanding of what it was that they were asked to do or whatever, you can add value in that sense. So remember, it's not just about the free fancy sandwiches that taste bitter and all you really want is a, cheese and pickle sandwich, but they got some fancy thing going on. Next thing I'll say is ask the HR team if they have any overview or insight into these. So if they're done in other areas, if there's anything that they see that works particularly well, or sometimes whoever covered for you might be the person that attended on your behalf. So just ask for their set of notes. They might have a different interpretation. And if you're supporting in terms of working with a finance or a commercial team or something, again, ask their input as well. Because you'll all be in the same meeting and you're all trying to achieve the same thing. So I don't understand why we can't just do that as opposed to sitting there and getting frustrated afterwards. The next thing I would say is, again, be yourself. I've sat in some funny senior meetings in times. I remember one incident where one guy offered to take some other guy into the car park, and I was sat in the middle of them. And then that kind of flare up happened in the morning, and in the afternoon I was talking about accountability and ownership, and I was saying that they were responsible for the consequence. It wasn't my job. It was about what they felt was the right thing. And I just remember the man was getting heated, and I was like, "Ooh, this is getting a bit tasty," So, these kind of things happen in these senior meetings, and sometimes it's about being yourself and actually de-escalating the situation. Because I remember when that person sort of turned to me with quite aggressively, and I was just like, "Yo, what's up, man? Chill, relax. It's okay. If you want to go to the car park, we can do that. We can have a cigarette break, even though I don't smoke. Neither do you. But let's relax a little bit." So, being yourself and letting the senior team understand that they can communicate with you, letting them see that there is a human side to you. Again, human resources. The other thing I would say is that you want to build some sort of trust. Because I think I said in the last podcast, I don't like this whole thing of HR professionals who sit in these senior meetings and then snitch, bro. Like straight away, just like, oh, this person said it. No, man, that's not what you're there for. Like, sometimes it's about partnering the business. If you're a business partner, partnering the business, not snitching on the business. You know, there's going to be some stuff that you see, and unless it's unethical, gross misconduct, and things like that, then just chill and ride the vibe, man. Like, you know, sometimes it's going to get a bit heated. Sometimes people need to say what they're actually feeling, and if they can't say it within the confines of their own senior team, then what fucking chance do we have? Right? Sometimes we need to create that environment for themselves, because otherwise they're just going to lean on you. You don't need to be having phone calls on the M1 at 7 o'clock at night, listening to someone bitch about their peer, when actually all they have to do is just go tell that person themselves. So if you want that maturity within your senior team, you have to create it. And if you don't, and everything is a final written warning or whatever, then they're never going to deal with it themselves. You're just always going to be on the phone on the M1. So, yeah, me personally, I'm not having it. The next thing I would say is find out what the business reports are that is used. You might not be able to read it, and if you can't, get someone to read it for you. In terms of numbers and KPIs and stuff, if you don't understand it, get someone to explain it. You know, be invested in what is going on in this meeting, as opposed to just being a blocker or someone who sits there and only speaks when they have their, opportunity to present their 2 slides. So bear that in mind. The next thing is have some HR slides. You know how many times I go to these senior events and the HR slide is just like some bullshit about how many people are over 50. No one cares. You know, what we want to see is what is actually going on. And I've referred to this previously about HR reporting and stuff like that, so I'm not going to go into it. But make sure you check your HR slides with whoever's leading the meeting, just to make sure that that's relevant. If you're partnering a director or a senior team, ask them what they want to see, and make sure that you cover any sort of updates and topical stuff from a HR point of view on those slides. Presenting things like people over 50 is just pointless. It doesn't add no value, okay? The next thing I would say is when you're asking questions, don't ask questions from a HR point of view. Ask questions that are going to help you understand the business better. Take notes and share them with the wider HR team. I'm pretty sure that when I was in a regional role, nobody read my notes. That's fine. But actually, you're doing the best practice bit. You know, I always had them saved somewhere. So then if somebody wanted to refer to what I was doing or look at an agenda or whatever, they have some scope there. These are best practice things for me. These are ways that I try to help those around me. The other thing is I would always say take away actions. So if you have the opportunity of getting feedback from these meetings, take those away with you. Do something with them. Don't just sit on it and just be like, oh, yeah, we'll have a look at it. Actually actively raise it because, I don't know. My last company, the senior meetings were before the HR meetings. So actually we had the opportunity, if anything came out of the senior meeting, we could then raise it in the HR meeting. That's fluidity. That's being collaborative, and that's like sharing best practices across places and challenging in the right way. If you've got business area demands, and actually as HR people, it's not about just going back and saying that's what the policy says. That really fucking winds me up. It's actually about taking it away and saying, do you know what, this doesn't work. This is what we can do differently, or this is what the guys have identified as an opportunity to do things differently. So let's take those opportunities to do that. The other thing is, if we have experience of these things and we're able to, I think I said it literally 5 minutes ago, we can offer insight as well and input, because sometimes if you come from one business, so when I came from retail into a sales organization, yes, it's different, but the customer service, as an example, was very different. The expectation was different. The standards of which we monitor things were different. And actually, if you see an opportunity or a best practice that you can offer to implement or suggest a better way of doing things, why don't you do that? Not in a, this is what I did, but in a, do you know what, this is what I've seen previously. This is how we did it. This was the benefit of it. This was the downside, yeah? Stop saying everything's so fucking great, man. You know that there's some downsides. So also cover that bit as well, because the downside in retail might be very different to a downside in sales and vice versa. So it's always about giving the opportunity to share some insight. In the new company I'm at, there is some relevance, there isn't some relevance. And, I've said stuff before where a director said, yeah, that's really cool, but that doesn't work here. That's cool. If you can explain to me why, take that on board, and actually I'm going to learn something new. So it's not about someone slapping you in the face or something like that. It's about how you take a business and move forward. So that's what I would always say. So the next thing I want to talk about is your stakeholder meeting. So this isn't the meeting where you're with the stakeholder and their reports or something. This is your one-on-one time. This is probably your reoccurring weekly or bi-daily catch-up that you have. So the first thing I would say is actually make sure that you agree a set time every week. So for example, mine is every Monday at 12 o'clock, and then it's every Friday between 1 and 3. So we have those two set times. Now, the reason we do that is because it's an opportunity for us to make sure that we cover everything off. Between 1 and 3 is some downtime that we actually get together and actually review everything systematically. And if there's any sort of key project stuff, it's actually a dedicated hour and a half that we can get to look at that as well. So, this whole time thing is quite important, especially if you're working with a senior team that consists of maybe 5 people, throughout the week, or you're regional or whatever it is. When I was regional, I think our set day was a Monday, the whole day. I used to go to the same regional office. My office was opposite his, and we used to make sure that we had some quality time together, or even if we didn't, because we was in the same vicinity, he could literally, give me the wanker sign and tell me to come over through the glass door. So, making sure that you're around them. I do set an agenda, but I'm not the kind of person that sets a very strict, rigid agenda. I like the fluidity of it. So I don't know if that's a confidence thing where, I don't know, maybe I'm lucky. I always seem to get the right subjects, the right topics going, and we seem to have everything under control. But I know that there are HR professionals who have very rigid structures, and I've been criticized many times in the past for not having one, but actually I seem to always deliver the results. So I'm not going to change what I'm doing until I don't. Sorry. And where I am now and my previous manager, in fact, it's only really 2 managers that had a problem with it, and I think that's more about the fact that they didn't like that I actually did partner, and I didn't, confine my stakeholders. But anyway, that's for another topic maybe. So the first thing I would say is, I always, when I do the calendar invite, we set it for a reoccurring, and then what I do is, if there is certain things that I need to make sure I cover off, I would add that to the agenda, the calendar as an agenda item. So it's not a reoccurring one, it's not set themes, but it's just making sure that there's something that I really need to make sure I cover off with them, that I don't forget. So it's always in that calendar thing, and then they see it as well, so they have some sort of indication, maybe a couple of hours beforehand, that that's what we're going to talk about. The first thing I always do is ask them to go first. Because I think as HR, we love the spotlight. We like to go first. We like to tell them all our concerns and all the things they've done wrong. But actually, we need to hear their concerns, because actually that gives them the facility to potentially raise something that you may already know, which, most of the time I think is the case. Like, I would say a good 80% of what I have or what I heard of or whatever, they'll come to me with if they haven't already previously the week before or something. So that's cool. I do allow for other people to come into these meetings. So especially when I was in a regional role and we all used to be there on a Monday, it might be that the director would ask the area managers to come in or something like that. So that's quite cool as well. If you're in a fluid environment where people can just drop in and add their 2 cents or whatever, my director when I was in the regional role, he was very good at actually working collaboratively. So he had this thing of, the subject experts are here. Let's get them all in the room and let's thrash it out together. So, there's been quite a few sort of war room meetings I've been involved in where, it's been quite intense, but in a good way, because we always get to what we want to at the end, and actually we thrash out a lot of those arguments or whatever that probably would happen in isolation or to different members of the senior team in isolation. But instead, we actually just iron it all out together, and we call each other a prick to each other's faces, and then we go there. So yeah, that's another thing. Ask for feedback. Yeah, always ask for a feedback on what the person wants to do differently, because sometimes we just keep it to the same thing, and it just becomes mundane. Sometimes it's about sometimes I like to take the meetings off site, or sometimes it's they need to change the time, or maybe they want to cover something else, or they want to do a session on a whiteboard or something. So just allow them the opportunity to dictate as well a little bit of how it goes. I always have my rolling actions as well, though. So again, it's in the calendar invite, the rolling actions that we're supposed to do, just as a reminder, because sometimes I think new projects can come down the line, and you sometimes forget things that maybe don't seem as important one week, but then you get asked to deliver it the next week without any sort of real attention having been paid to it. So just be mindful, have the actions there. Obviously, take a call collectively together. So your stakeholder might say to you, actually, that's not the top priority right now. This is, you'll get something from a HR director, but they'll get something from a CEO. So you have to consider this when you're having those conversations, the things, the plans, or whatever it is you're thinking about. Can change. The next thing I would say is that I see a lot of HR people that need a lot of hand holding as well. So we have this thing of saying that our stakeholders always want us and they always want us to be available and blah blah blah. But then the bit that we don't always seem to sort of recognize as well is that we actually do that as well. Like we seem to have this inability to actually do things in their absence. And to be honest, my director, I'm not going to say that I ran the region in his absence because that would be incorrect, but actually he trusted me to do things and get on with things in his absence. And actually, if he's trusting me to do things in his absence while he's away, then that means I can do it in his absence when he is there. And it is about actually building that trust where the director knows that you're going to go to them with something that they need to be involved in. But actually, you're not going to involve them in everything because you are going to take some responsibility yourself to actually ensure that something within the region or whatever it is, the area you look after, is going to have something delivered. And then likewise, the HR director then gets a bit more trust in you because they can see that collaboratively you have that stance, you have a presence in your area or region or whatever. And you can actually make things happen without needing someone to kind of be like, oh, but this person said and this person said, because that is a fucking wind up. You need to be able to go out there on your own 2 feet and actually go and deliver something or influence something or change something. Sometimes you're going to have to influence stuff when they're not there that might go against the director. That has happened a few times for me. But you know what? If it's the right thing and you're getting a result and they're not there, do you know what? I'm just going to do it anyway. It's about risk analysis. I guess I'm quite fortunate that I can do these things quite quickly and people sort of buy into it. And then it is about, sometimes, what is it, cliche thing? Do it and ask for forgiveness later. I do kind of agree with that to some extent. But yeah, happy to be told if that's wrong. The next thing I would say is when you're going into the end of the meeting, just to make sure it's very clear what the actions are. Because I think sometimes you can get very carried away with your stakeholder. You can plan to reset the world in 3 working days. You can plan to change the whole pay structure, bonus structure, and all this. And this is literally from just a 2-minute conversation. So just make sure it's very clear what the actions are and who is responsible for it, especially with stakeholder. You can't always do it for them because there's stuff that they have to influence or have conversations or get data for that you necessarily might not have the capacity to do, or actually you can't do it because that's just not your fucking job. So it is about making sure that you set rigid deadlines for certain things, especially project related, or if it's something that you're working on, just making sure that the conversation topic keeps on the table, and that's where the whole email reminder thing comes handy because it does give you that focus when you think about your prep. So like my stakeholders, they know that that's what I do, so they know that when they get whatever time that they can to review it, they'll do that. And that's quite cool because sometimes you get emails ahead of things saying, oh, this is what we talked about, am I right in saying this is what I need to do or whatever, and that gives you an opportunity. And the good thing is that they're focused on it as well. So the next one is shop floor meetings, huddles, town halls. I'm not the biggest fan of these things. I'm not very comfortable in those situations, even though I was a store trainer. I don't know why. I think as I've kind of gone up the sort of HR ladder, if you like, I've become more and more self-conscious in these situations. Not because I'm afraid or anything like that, just I have an awareness now of the impact of our presence and stuff like that, and actually, sometimes making the wrong eye contact, sometimes saying the wrong thing, sometimes potentially come across as insensitive. I can see what impact it has, so I am quite mindful when I'm in these scenarios. But look, I think the first thing is to be yourself. Again, and I've actually highlighted on this one, the employees on the shop floor really need to see who you are as an individual. So it's not about coming down and actually giving them this is the HR agenda and this is what we're going to do for you and blah, blah, blah. It's about having a bit of character. So the way I'm talking to you guys on this podcast is how I would talk on the shop floor as well, bar the swearing. Making them feel comfortable, challenging back as well. So, be yourself. Listen, listen. If you are given feedback or given suggestions, this is a blessing, right? This is how you change culture, is by getting the feedback, getting the questions, and you have to be prepared for that. So I always make a point to just make sure that, especially if I'm new into an environment, what was the last set of questions and stuff like that, because that kind of gives you a sense of what things are. And if you've been walking the shop floor already anyway, and you've spoken to people, you'll have some sort of idea. Where I'm at right now, I'm quite fortunate that people are quite more than prepared to give their opinion and their feedback. But this is great because it gives us two things. It gives us the opportunity to actually answer these questions, and sometimes we've actually done stuff already, or the business has. So you can actually eliminate those straight away in front of everyone, and everyone sees the example. And it's not about making someone look like a fucking idiot. It's about actually taking on board that question, because there's quite a few people sometimes who have the same opinion. You get one who's brave enough to come and sort of ask you that question, or comfortable in challenging you, which is great, right? We need to adopt this. They're not difficult. They're actually trying to do something, and these are the people that you need to harness and put an arm around. Not label them and not try and get them removed from the business, because these are the guys that, hopefully if you start giving examples back and start, giving the, quite happy to hear a solution kind of thing, that kind of puts these people in a position of, they have that power over people or that impact, and you're giving them that facility to actually expand on it. And sometimes it's going to work for them, sometimes it's not. But as a management team, it means that you have actually empowered someone, and you're actually, acknowledging that voice for the people, if you like. Input where needed. Yeah, so if you're able to answer it, do. But if you don't have an answer, don't try and answer it. Like, I've seen quite a few times where HR professionals will be in a huddle or something, and a question comes up, and because they really, really want to hear the sound of their own voice on the microphone, although the irony is I'm on the microphone right now hearing myself, but they really want to hear themselves and how great they are and all this and that, and they start saying some shit that has no relevance, or do you know what, again, we're in a different environment, it's not necessarily going to work here. So just be mindful of that when you are when you're doing the whole input bit. The other thing I say is smile and have open body language. Be approachable. Don't be standoffish. Don't be standing there as if you don't want to fucking be there, even if you don't want to be there. Be sensibly dressed. That sounds stupid, but some of the conditions that people are working in, they might be in a chilled area, they might be in a warm area or whatever. Just make sure you're going to be comfortable to stand there for a period of time, because it might be that you get caught after the hearing and people want to approach you and discuss things. So that's quite important for me. Treat everyone the same. Sometimes you're going to be in meetings where it's managers and team leaders and employees or whatever. Just be the same with everyone. And if there's anything that you need to follow up on anything, yeah, if you can do it there and then, like I said earlier, do. But if not, if it's something you have to go away and get the answer for, make sure you please come back with an answer. Like, don't just take something away and leave someone hanging, because they might not see you every day. There's different shift patterns, people work weekends, etc., etc. So make sure you get some sort of form of contact for that individual, whether that's an email or something. It's quite important. The other thing I'd say is attend consistently. So don't just show up when you want something out of it. Consistently go to it. So even if you don't have something to add, or you don't have an agenda topic or something, still go there, listen to what's going on, get the vibe. Because sometimes the HR professional, all they want to see is your presence. They don't want to know you as the guy that's just in the office or girl that's just in the office. They want to see your presence. They want to know that you're there. And they need to see you actually engaging and changing things on the front line, not from a screen. If you can't attend, but you need a message sharing, give that to somebody reliable, and make sure that they take notes for you, or any challenges or anything comes back to you. So, that message still needs to be conveyed or whatever, and you can share it amongst different people so that actually they can see that, you're trusting the people around them as well, and that different people will have their turn to actually represent as well and take questions or whatever. And sometimes that can really do good things for a team, because sometimes it feels nice hearing a HR thing from your line manager or a team leader. So sometimes just doing that also shares that level of responsibility, provided it's not a controversial topic. If it's a controversial topic, HR people, I think you should do it your fucking selves, not get a manager to do it who doesn't have all the answers because you haven't bothered to give them all the answers. And yes, that does happen in 2020. So, I'm just actually reading a message on my phone from my wife, which is quite interesting. Right, so anyway, back to the actual topic. So, disciplinaries and investigations. So, the first one of these, I think, is quite important, or the first few. It's about actually stamping down your authority. No, actually, it's not. It's about stamping down how you want the culture to be. And I think that is a very, these first few hearings are going to outline your reign, if you like. And I take these things very seriously. Like, my ethics and my ethos and the whole honesty and transparency piece that I stand for, fairness and all that, this is the opportunity to show it. And it depends on the kind of role you are. Like when you're regional, there's less attachment to people, in terms of they're not going to be people who see it every day. You're not really going to know the full story of someone unless they're a real sort of highlighted individual. I'm not going to say problematic, I'm going to say highlighted, because sometimes I think when we actually investigate it further and see the actual issue, they're not a problem, the fucking manager is, or the HR person that had them beforehand. So I'm going to say highlighted individual. um you know you get the well, this person's always here, or this person's always an issue, and all this and that. But I think it's actually about looking at something holistically and looking at what the actual issue is. So, for example, when I do these things, I always make sure that the processes are right, that the company has done everything they can before we start accusing people of being uh, in the wrong or whatever. So, I can't go into too much detail about this, but there is one particular case that kind of sticks out. But my stance is that, if it's an investigation, I want the fact finding to be done. I want them to actually ask the questions, and I want them to look at the whole thing around it. So if somebody challenges back around a process, well, can we have a look at that as part of the investigation, as opposed to sending them forward to a disciplinary to then take no action? So for me, the investigation part is key. However, what I don't agree with is these massive investigation reports, or whatever we want to call them, summaries, ER summaries, whatever. Like, um, investigation is fact finding. It's not a court case. Like, let's just calm the fuck down. If you're doing a solid enough investigation, everything's on the investigation, and if you've got all the documents, you're going to send that out in a pack anyway. Like, if we want people to start behaving in a mature way, the way we do this is by treating them like mature adults. And you know what? This whole thing of like over the top stuff. Like, what is the actual rights that we have to do? What is it that we have to do? Like, what are we scared of? Right? If you want people to comply and you want people to have that free mindset or whatever, they do that by being given that accountability on themselves to manage themselves in terms of their conduct. So, yeah, that's just a little bit about me. So, the first thing to do is read and understand the relevant policy and procedure. Now, I am the absolute worst at this. I should be better at that. But if you're not so confident and you're not so sure around how the process or something works, then make sure you read it up, because you're going to look like a fucking idiot when the union destroys you. And how many times I've seen it where a HR person has been absolutely wiped by a union person because the union know their policies and procedures, and so does any good employee forum rep. So make sure you understand it as well, especially if you know that there's going to be a union rep there. The next thing is ensure you follow all the steps. This sounds simple, but 9 times out of 10, there's like some template that you're going to read, or the manager's going to read. So just to make sure they do it. Don't set them up to fail. I hate the HR professionals who just sit back, say fuck all, and then bitch about it when it's all wrong. Like, you're there, right? You have the opportunity to do it. We have the opportunity to adjourn. If something's going wrong, let's take the adult step to make sure that we correct it and do it right. The next thing I'll say is ensure that you stick to your HR style. And what I mean is that when you're offering advice, remember that you're HR, and you're not there to sack everyone or side with the business or whatever. Just make sure that whatever your stance is, that you're following it through. Now, I'm kind of scared when I say this because there's a lot of HR people that are literally here to dominate and take over the world. If that's you, then just try and change that outlook on life. But just think about the impact that you're having. And like I said previously, that this is a massive opportunity for you to install culture and to install trust and belief into methods and things. So take this very seriously. Challenge the hearing if needed. Sometimes I see things going on that I don't actually think it's an investigation or disciplinary. I think it's more of an action and takeaway for us to go and do. I think I said it previously. My stance is that if we made a mistake, we come out and say it as a team, senior team together, whether that's HR, whether that's the business, or we come out together and say it. Like it's a united front. We all come out and we all say the same thing. Ensure that you outline your standards as well. So I think the reason why I don't need to rely on these massive investigation summaries is because I'm not going to let it pass me until it's at the right point. And my HR advisors or assistants who have done it know what my standards are as well. So actually it's about making sure that you've done the base groundwork before going into these situations. Obviously, if it's your first ones, you might not necessarily have it. So check in with your teammates or whatever to make sure that there is consistency and there is a tie-in. But there's still the opportunity for you to have your stance. So for example, the reality is when you have your first investigation, your HR advisor or assistant that reports into you is probably not going to do something without you having some sort of input. So that's where you would then enforce your standards. And I did say the word enforce because I think it's quite serious. My standards are a certain way and I expect it to be followed. And if you don't want to follow it, then you can just go follow someone else. Just make sure that comes out. And, I don't drop that. And I think in some of these controversial disciplinaries that you kind of get, let's be honest, people say this is what the outcome is. Like, I'm not going to beat around it. I don't care what people think. This does happen. But it's about challenging upwards. If you think that something is wrong, about presenting why it's not wrong, and then you've done your bit. And then making sure that, for your part, you've done the right thing. There's many times where I've been said that that's a disciplinary and the person's probably not even got a warning because when I've looked at it, it's our fucking fault. And it's not about getting the person out of the business. It has to be done the right way. If it's a performance management thing, then do the performance management process. Don't just discipline them for some shit. Or attempt to, because if you're working with me, unfortunately, that's not going to work. Ensure you understand the severity of the issue. I think we need to think of that both ways. So is it really an issue? Is it not really an issue? And how is the impact on the customer or the service or the business? There's the whole piece around brand damaging. I don't think that gets used very much nowadays, but there are so many actions that happen that is brand damaging. But then we just need to make sure that if we're saying someone's doing brand damaging behavior, why are they doing it? And making sure that we understand that they had the choice to do it, not that we forced them into a position. Because sometimes businesses will send someone out in a vehicle that's brand damaging. Just as an example. So it's okay to say that someone's brand damaging, but just make sure the tools and everything around them is the right thing. I've actually seen it where vans have been let on the road without proper health and safety checks and stuff like that. This is in my previous company. So if that's the case, then why are you then trying to discipline someone if you actually knew that wasn't in the right place? So don't be a fucking idiot. And if you, the HR person, know this, challenge it on the spot. And you know what? Discipline that fucker. Like, why are we taking it on the person who didn't even know? Okay, maybe they should have done it. But actually, at the same token, the manager's okay to just let that shit happen. Like, no. So make sure that your ethics and everything comes through there. Don't follow your ego. I do say this because I have done loads of appeals. I used to be the appeal man where I used to work. And you can see that the HR person has really gone on an ego trip with the actual disciplinary manager. Like, do you know what? If you get someone like me in the appeal, it's going to get overturned anyway because it's very evident to anyone reading it. Like, I've always was taught that you have to present the case for the next stage. So if you're doing an investigation, you do it as a disciplinary for an appeal. And then generally that's how you get it right. And the last part is, when you're listening in these things, listen and be fair. Yeah, and take away stuff. If you have to do something differently on the back of a disciplinary or an investigation, then make sure that you call it out and make sure that people understand it so the same thing does not happen again. I guess maybe this kind of comes under the whole disciplinary thing, but I put it as a separate bit. So put it as employee relations. So this is the things that aren't in a formal setting, though. That's what I mean by this. So the first thing again is to be yourself. Make sure that you stay true to your style. Make sure that you actually use this as a point that if it's not a disciplinary or an investigation, this is where you say so. This is where you actually tell people to man the fuck up or tell them to actually go and address the situation in the right way. A lot of HR issues aren't really HR issues. Sometimes it's actually we have just not equipped the manager or given them the confidence to actually go and do the right thing. So bear that in mind when you're having these conversations and actually make sure you're listening and you understand what it is that you are being asked or being asked to give advice on. The first thing, second thing I would say as well is don't follow the hype, man. I think that as HR professionals, we can really get hyped up into situations and we get dragged into this amazing novel of events that has happened. Like, no, just cut the noise and actually make it factual. Like, actually, what is the actual issue? What is the one thing or two things or three things we're focusing on? Because I don't really care about what the weather conditions were that day, unless it was an accident at work. I don't really care about, whether they drive a Ford or whether they drive a Honda. Like, irrelevant to me. I don't care what hair color they have. I just want to know what the actual issue is and what it is we think that they've done wrong. And that then leads to not entertaining nonsense. Like, I think, we add fuel to the fire a lot of the time. We get dragged into it. Like, I've seen HR professionals and one actual incident has occurred, but they've asked questions about four other things. And it's like, why are you doing that? It's not relevant to what you're talking about. Like, stick on task, stick on topic, end the conversation in a nice 5 minutes and agree the actions and next step and make sure that you follow it up. And that's about it. If it's not a disciplinary thing. That leads on to being honest. Like, when I think back to my managers when they first meet me, they're all a bit confused because I just tell them how it is. Like, you know what? This is on you to go and rectify, not the employee. Like, I think we put a lot of emphasis on what the employee should do, but we don't look at ourselves. We don't look at our management team, and we don't think, are we actually creating the right environment and giving them the right tools, or are we actually treating them in the right way, in terms of how we're asking them to do things or, how we're addressing them and stuff like that. This is all important stuff. These are all things that actually really tie into relationship with employee and manager. The next thing is ask your questions. I will always listen to the story until it becomes nonsense and I'll start asking questions. And the questions should be asked about what they've done as well as what the employee has done. And this will, 9 times out of 10, catch someone out who has done something, what I'm going to say, wrong. Because then they'll be yeah, but this is what yeah. That means you've been a prick. Like, because if you're not able to articulate it properly, then we're going to have a problem. The next thing is, don't just forward these things on. Like, check the facts. That's the other thing. Sometimes HR professionals, we like to just like forward it on and pass it to someone else and say, this is your problem. Actually look at what the situation is and what's actually happened and listen to it. Be firm in your approach, but ensure the policy and procedure is applied. So whatever it is that you're saying, be very clear on it. I do have a firm stance when it comes to employee relations stuff because I just don't like the threat of people feeling a certain way. Like, if something is wrong, then we need to say we've done it wrong. And I've said that quite a few times now and actually refer to the policy. But if the policy is wrong itself, how about that? Like, have we thought about it, Because if a policy hasn't been changed since 2015 and you're trying to enforce it and actually, the world's moved on since then, sometimes these policies can be wrong and it is about amending it. So sometimes it is about taking away the action and looking how to improve things so that we don't have a repeat of this occurrence, not that the individual is always the ones to blame. This person is a historic issue. Well, I just ignore that shit because you're not historic to me. So go by the first actual interactions you have with this person, the kind of way they present themselves and the questions they ask. Let's forget about the historic shit. Because if we're expecting people to move on, why are we then listening to what they did in 2016? Like, just think about it for a minute. You're telling people that, this is a new regime, it's a new way of doing things, but then you want to take into account how this person was. So that just totally defeats the purpose of what you just said. So you will never hear me sort of, I will listen to it. I'll listen to it, but I won't entertain it. I'll always go back and look in the file, because the other piece is we talk about historic people and historic issues and all this shit. You go in the file and there's fuck all there anyway. So they weren't that much of a problem, was they? There's other ways to get my attention on things, and crying wolf and talking about 2016 before I even existed doesn't entertain me at all. The other thing, which I kind of highlighted on, but just check if the manager's the actual fucking issue in the first place. And if they are, just make sure you categorically explain to that person they're the issue and why. And give them obviously the opportunity to explain why they don't think they aren't, or what their versions of events are. But if they are the issue, supporting a whole senior team is about telling someone they're their issue, because that's how they develop, that's how they get better, and that's how they correct it. Otherwise, just ignoring it and letting that person continue to do the same mistake again and again just creates more issues again and again. And it is about actually removing yourself from these employee relation situations, empowering managers and team leaders to actually be able to handle these things themselves in a non-formal way, which means they don't have to do 20-page employee summary reports, and everyone can focus on the bigger tasks at hand, things about making things better, processes, and all that kind of stuff. So that's the area of which that comes from. So the last bit I'm going to talk about is workshops. Workshops, we deliver those. We should be. Or any sort of mentoring or training sessions. So the first thing I would say is this should be standard, but I think if you're new into a company, it might not necessarily be something that is easy, if you like. So the first thing is check the room and equipment. I learned that the hard way. When you find out some new technology and you don't actually know how to use it, or it's not compatible with the old bus up laptop that they're giving you. So it's always quite important to make sure that you've checked the room and the equipment. The other thing is, I took this for granted where I was in my previous role, because we had massive boardrooms. I think we had like 3 different sort of training areas we can use. So it's never really a problem. But where I am now, there's training all the time because of the kind of business it is, and the rooms are always being used. It's not that easy to just go and book something in. Make sure you check the nomination process. Again, I was used to doing it a way where you looked after your areas of responsibility, but I've also seen roles where you're actually supposed to open these invitations up. So just make sure you understand that when you're doing a workshop, who is expected to attend and what the actual ways of doing it are. The next thing, which I use everywhere, is make sure you check the delegates, because sometimes there's going to be delegates who are underperforming and they're on performance improvement plans. So you need to be mindful of that when you're running a session, depending on how your tone is and things like that. Myself, I deliver it the way I'm delivering this podcast. We talk about things factually. I will challenge them back on things. I'll always look for solutions if they come with problems within a workshop. I do say to them they can ask any questions, but if they're going to bring stupidness in terms of things for themselves or whatever, then they are going to be told that this isn't the right forum. But at the same time, we'll pick this up offline. So making sure that you do allow and facilitate. There are going to be times where if you allow people to ask their questions or whatever, and you might think they're stupid. I do see times when the actual room actually answers it and gives their own examples. So you want to sort of breed that as well. I take these workshops as a environment where I can actually use this to mold the culture that I want to install across my senior team. Provided that obviously you have the trust to do that and you're the right person to do that. I believe I am. So I use these sessions to actually, knock things out of them, give examples, share past experiences, because obviously I have been a manager myself, and asking for feedback about why they do things a certain way or what it is that they see, and actually saying to them, this is about how we move forward. Because to the employee point, about living in the past and whatever, if your management team are doing things that don't work anymore because it's draconian or they're still expected to be addressed as sir or madam, this ain't going to work. So you need to bring them into 2020 with you. That's why you are doing these workshops. It's not just about teaching them how to do a process. It's about the mannerisms, the behaviors. One of the things I'm very big on is the behaviors, business maturity, self-learning, self-educating, consistent self-development. These are things that have to happen, and the only way that you install that is by using these sessions to do so and instilling that sort of culture of constant development as a team. And if you've got different communities, mix them up, because you're going to have different experiences across the communities in terms of how they do things, different forms they might use, etc., etc. So it's good to share that and get best practice across your whole communities. And it also gives you the opportunity to align your message. So, for example, right now I have 3 different communities, and they're all getting the same. They're all going to get the same stance. They're all going to get the same sort of education. So it's a really good tool to use for that instance. And I also use them as an opportunity to give feedback as well that I've had on certain things from employees that are related to the actual topic of the workshop. So, for example, absence management, it might be things around actual too much communications, no communications. Disciplinaries, it might be unfair treatment or investigations, etc. So it's worth doing that. These are the kind of forums I would use to do that as well. The next thing is include everyone in the room. There are going to be people who don't want to talk, but there are going to be people who do want to talk. But just make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to impact the course of the day. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones that have the really good things to say. So I always try to go around the room with eye contact. I won't point at anyone unless I'm comfortable to do so. So, there are certain people that when you need the room to get going, I'll literally be like, yo, you answer the question, just to get it moving. Or I'll be like, what's your thoughts on this, to the person that isn't talking. So you don't necessarily have to put them in a question spot. It's about, what's your thoughts, what's your way of doing this, or, what do you think we could do differently as well, to those who are more quiet. Don't just read the slides. Add a bit of character, man. The amount of times I sit in these things and someone is just literally like, include everyone. Don't just read the slides. Ask for examples. Come on, man. No one's going to engage. How many times do you sit in a workshop and you think to yourself, that was really monotone or that was really boring? Yes, everyone is going to be in a room. They're going to look tired. It's difficult for people to listen if the workshops are quite heavy in terms of content. So that's fine. But if you add a bit of character and you add a bit of dynamicy in terms of back and forth conversation, people are more obliged to actually listen. The irony is I met my wife and I did a training session for her. I think I did her induction and she gave me a bad review. But that was in 2012. So hopefully I've moved on from there. So yeah, we all have area for improvement and development. The other thing to ask is for examples. I think I just said that, but make sure the examples are relevant. And if you've actually done something topical with someone in the more recent time, then make sure that you actually bring their examples to life, because sometimes if you're able to use them to actually articulate what they did and what the benefit was, and I would say to someone straight, don't just say whatever, actually give your actual input, and actually was there anything on reflection now that you're looking back that you would do differently. So this is also that opportunity, and that is helping the culture that you're trying to instill. The other thing is there are no wrong answers. So, don't make someone feel like a fucking idiot because they don't know what the answer is. That's the whole point of coming to a workshop or a training session, is because you don't necessarily have the answers. It might be because it's something new, or it might be something that nobody's actually told you. So ensure that people have the facility to ask the questions. But obviously if they're leery, we get the people who are a bit, oh yeah, oi, oi. Go back on that. It's cool. If they're comfortable to do it to you, do it back. And that sort of sets the tone as well. Obviously, not in a rude way. I think if you've listened to the podcast, you can understand how my delivery method is, and that is how I do it. And generally, people seem to be okay with that. The only time I guess there is a wrong answer is if it's a legal question you're asking and they just get it wrong. Obviously, in that instance, you'd have to tell them the right thing. So yeah. Ask for feedback at the end. Ask for feedback, be honest with it, and if you've been given honest feedback throughout, you'll get the honest feedback. So that is imperative. I think the other thing is be mindful that, other people might hear feedback as well. So that person's line manager, you can always ask them what was the feedback, how did they feel it went, etc., etc. Because you want to know how to improve your sessions as well. You want people to buy into it. You want people to return. So bear that in mind. And I think I just want to recap and make sure that, the piece where I said about these meetings, these first introductions, these are the first opportunities that people get to see the culture that you want to bring. And I'm very big on that. And I really take these things seriously. I really use every opportunity to actually shape, because it's not for me to say that my way is correct, but it is for me to say how I want to shape things. And you know what I'm quite comfortable with when I've been employed into a role, it's because of my approach. And we want to, ensure that when you're doing this, it's from a place of wanting to do the right thing. So yeah, look, that is the end of this podcast. This has actually superseded the last podcast, episode 4. So we've covered quite a lot. Again, if you've got any feedback or suggestions to make the show better, please do that. We're currently sitting on 98 listens, and I don't know if you've listened to the other one. I don't even know if I'm going to release these at 2 different times, but yeah, I did the last one on Monday, at which point I think we was at 90 something, maybe even 80 something. But we're very close to 100, so that's really cool. I really hope we make it to 100 before the end of the day, although it is 2307, 1107. That would be really cool. Some really good attention on LinkedIn, so hopefully the platform rises a bit more. But if you've listened to the show and you've listened to all the episodes, I'm really grateful to that. And currently, as it stands, this is the last episode of season 1. I haven't given much thought to anything beyond the 5 episodes. I was due to go on holiday next week, which has been cancelled. So maybe I've got some time to think about other things I want to do. But if you're listening to this and you got some suggestions for anything around probation or you'd like to hear, please drop it in the comments or drop a message on LinkedIn. That would be really cool. So until the next one, I hope you've enjoyed the show and for the foreseeable the season. So yeah, thanks for listening and be cool.